Hi, we're going to talk about Beck's Query Designer in this unit. There are 4 major learning goals. First, to describe what Query Designer is. And 2, to describe the major components of a query. And 3, to create and run a query. And 4th, to configure properties of query components. Okay, here we have a summary of Beck's tools, and they are all related. First, the Query Designer, as the name implies, is used to create queries, and they are based on info providers, which we have not talked about a lot, but we will in the future. For now, just think about info providers as something that will provide data to a query, okay, so that we can display data after we run the query. And the queries, after they are created, they are stored on the server and are made available to other Beck's tools, including Web Application Designer, Report Designer, Beck's Analyzer, and Beck's Web Analyzer. Okay, now in this course, we'll be using Beck's Analyzer and Beck's Web Analyzer only, but understand queries, once they are created, they can also be used by the other two tools. All right, again, the Beck's Query Designer is used to design queries, and simply put, it is a graphical tool for defining both tabular and multidimensional queries. Okay, because we've talked about OLAP analysis or multidimensional analysis, so people are probably more concerned with multidimensional queries. Okay, but in reality, we can also create simple queries that involve just one dimension. Okay, then in that case, you will have like a table of data, such as a list of customers residing in Michigan. Okay, that will be a tabular query involving just one dimension, which is fine too. Okay, the Query Designer is a standalone client program. Okay, so we don't have to get into a BW to run the program, and we'll see how that is done in the next few slides. And here, queries, several attributes about them. First, queries are the basis for all reporting and analysis in SAP BI. Okay, and again, as I just mentioned, we can create both tabular as well as multidimensional queries. And also, once they are created, they are then stored on the server, and more specifically, they are stored in the metadata repository of SAP BW. And when we run the query, it is processed by the analytic process engine, which is a component of SAP BW that we've talked about before. And finally, query results can be displayed in any Beck's tools, as we have talked about. Okay, on this slide, we have the basic components of a query, and we'll talk more about some of the components in more detail in the next few slides. So a query is made of key figures and characteristics that we have talked about before. Okay, and also notice that we can have free characteristics. Free characteristics are basically those that we can define in the query, but they are not displayed automatically when the query is run. Okay, but they can be used for further drill down or OLAP analysis if need be by including them when we run the query. Okay, structures are basically combinations of key figures and characteristics, and we can define structures so that they may be reused in other queries. Variables, just like in any other software, we can define variables for easy processing. We'll talk more about variables later on. Filters can also be defined, and filters are defined on characteristics. And conditions, on the other hand, are defined on key figures. And finally, exceptions. We'll talk all about them in more detail later on. Okay, a review question about queries. And another review question.